right. My name is Rich Schmidt. I'm here with Luke and Emily Hayr. We're at Gemini Vineyards. It's August 12th, 2020. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
Welcome.
First question for you to get us started. Why grapes?
Yeah, it's a fair question, obviously. I think we're both very avid samplers of the product for a long time. But I think the big driver over the years has been wanting to sort of get out on property and do something with that property. We looked at several around the area, nut farming, everything like that. I think, and then I think we were drawn to the industry through contacts we have, through I guess the notion of wine itself, and then. And then we just sort of fell into it. It wasn't not through. I think it was a lack. There was definitely a drive to not do grapes because we felt like we liked the product so much. But
we also knew very little about kind of what it took to get into it.
But I think then it just naturally we just sort of fell into it, and then just the people we know already knew in the industry. I wouldn't, we're definitely, involved enough to have enough contacts and people that sort of help, cushion the drive as we moved into it. So
tell us about your kind of pre-wine life and pre-grape life, growing up where you're born, and then kind of how you met.
I'm from Portland, so I grew up out 26 area, and I'm from a big family. I have 3 sisters, and my grandparents always were on acreage growing up, so I feel like I'm a little bit of a country girl at heart. But we love doing that and going out on camping adventures. So I've always been kind of an outdoorsy person. And I went to Oregon State. I have a background in public health. Got my master's degree there, and I did a lot of community or public health policy work for the last 7 years before we had our boys. And Luke and I met at an 80s bar at a 80s dance night or something. We both were just randomly I was out with my sister and her friends, and he was celebrating passing a work certification test. He was working in Abu Dhabi at the time, United Arab Emirates, and the certification test was randomly in Portland. And we met that night, and then just traveled back and forth for a couple of years, or a year, I guess. And then I moved to Australia after grad school, and I lived there for a year and renovated his house, and we traveled around and did some random things, random adventures over there. Met his family, hung out there for a while, and then I got tired of the humidity, and I drug him back here.
Yeah. So I think what else? Obviously Australian, undergrad in marine biology, based in Tasmania, which really was my first foray into Pinot. It's another sort of world Pinot region. So that's really sort of got us into the varieties that we sort of face today. So very, very similar climate and everything like that. So I was there for 10 years, and the company I'm with is an Australian company. We're based here as well in the US. The company also, and that's more into the environmental engineering world. So I've been fortunate enough to work all around the world. Africa, Europe. Asia, New Guinea, and then different stints in different places. So, but it's great. Moving here to Oregon, it definitely feels like home. So it's great we all put down roots and raise a family here.
So, at what point did the idea of farming, of starting this, like you talked about earlier, what point did that become part of the conversation? Was that what drove you back to Oregon, or was that once you were here?
I think once we were here, we sort of settled, and we had property on the coast and different things like that, and I think we just both I grew up on acreage and have done a lot of different farming, whether it's sort of more on the sort of ocean farming with aquaculture, or cereals and sheep and everything like that. But Yeah, I think just the notion to be on land, feel like you sort of can do something, and then as we sort of gravitated to with having children, that we felt that there was a real need that they need to sort of be on something where they can get their hands dirty and do a little more too.
Tell me about this place and finding it, and why you wanted to be here.
So we embarked, like I said, we looked at a lot of different properties. We started, looking, whether it was walnuts or hazelnuts or other sort of different type of ventures. But we actually were very close on another vineyard that was sort of out of Gaston, closer to Elk Cove. And it was a big property. It was about 60 acres, and it had the full blown component, winery, the whole lot, and. So we were, I think, maybe 2 days short of closing that deal. We were all lined up, ready to go. And our good friend, David Page, who was also on a venture looking for properties at the same time, rang me up and said, you should have a look at this place. And so I quickly, that same day, I quickly rang Emily and I said, look, this come up, and and considering we were so imminently closing on the other one, and it was a lot of work being a full commercial venture, it was like, really, do we want to look at another property? And so I said, sure, this is it. And so we met out here, and and then everything sort of joined together. Like once we, the site, we love this area. We have done for a long time, and that was great. The original homestead, which we're sitting here today, it was already sort of partially underway. It was going to be a winery originally, but it was just a shell. So that was great. And then the vineyard was owned originally by Dale Hatfield and started by Dale Hatfield.
1995.
The original grapes were planted in 95. And we connected really well with Dale and just the whole sort of story and his philosophy of how he started it. And then, the final kicker, Dale had named the property Gemini Vineyards. And, for me, I think it wasn't until that night that it finally dawned on my head that, Gemini Vineyards being twins, and we have twin boys. So I was focused on the economics and, the site itself, and then it just seemed there was a number of things. So, and then I think, other peripheral pieces being... Dale is a great friend with Jim Prosser. They went to school together, and Jim's been a big advocate and has purchased this fruit since 2000, since the first harvest. Jim, we became connected with Jim and been friends with him for 10 years. So, there was just that, again, that cushion of, people we knew, people we trusted, who've developed and could speak for the place and what had been done for it. So, we just felt a lot of confidence here. So, as I said, we were in that contract and working with that other property. So we had to quickly do a 180 and
very quickly for me. It was like.
So and we never looked back. So once we got here, and so we did that late 2018 and took everything over right from the get-go and have been going ever since.
And for me, I was really excited about the other property, but not as excited as I should have been. And I was really trying to get it, talk it up in my head. And so, I had a lot more convincing to do in my brain than I think Luke did. And so it was kind of a work in progress for me. And then so I had done all that work to get really excited. And then Luke called me and he's like, Dave said we need to come see a new property. And I was just like, Dave, how could you? But anyway, so when our twins were little, they were 1 and a bit, and one of them really struggled to sleep or to nap. And so we lived about 10 minutes from here, and I just randomly found this road one day, and I would do the loop from our house. It was about 45 minutes, so I did that a couple of times to help them sleep sometimes. So I happened upon this road, and I loved it. It was my favorite. So I drove past here several times, and I always looked at the house because we watched it being built and developed. Mm-hmm. And so we didn't exactly know what property it was that Dave was showing us. He just said, show up at this address. So when I pulled up, Luke could see it in my face, and he's just like, play it cool. But it was already done for me. I was like, that's it. This is the one for us. So it was very minimal convincing for me. Because it just, when you feel, you hit that spot where it's like, this is your paradise and you know it. So that's how it was for me.
Tell me about the vineyard as you found it, and what shape it was in, and what you kind of saw as you looked at it for what you could do next.
Yeah, I think so. The site we currently manage today is a blend of two sites. So part of it was the block we're sitting on here, which is a full 20 acres, and then there's a 10-acre block over there. We had to part of the work was to sort of get it all subdivided and put it all together as one. Our property, well, not a large one, like 26 acres, and we have about 15 acres under blind. When we purchased it was only 11, and it was underway. Like the original 5 acres would have been planted at 95, and then another 6 added after then. And so I mean, to say what condition it was in, Dale was great. It was meticulous and left a legacy that to try and pick it up and keep moving along was great. I think we were very fortunate. Whereas some of the other properties that we had to look at.
Sorry for the bulldog underneath. Just making yourself at home there.
That's right. Other properties like this, I think this one, well, there was elements to definitely pick up and work on. It definitely wasn't that sort of, having to retrofit it or anything, which, again, some of the other properties we had that had definitely had a large amount of that work to do, which, definitely we were up for the challenge, but trying to raise a family, kick off a vineyard, keep some other sort of, business-related items moving too. It's much really much. So, I think we felt really comfortable with the size of it, and it had that opportunity and real need for that bit of expansion.
And luckily, the vineyard manager Victor agreed to stay on with us. He took a big leap of faith in us, which was huge, and he keeps this place immaculate. He is a perfectionist and he knows exactly kind of what should be happening when. Really keeps us on track. So luckily he agreed to stay with us, and he knows every row. I mean, he's awesome. So we were so thankful to have him come with us and join our small team, and he really keeps it into great shape.
I'm curious about learning. Was there anything about grape farming that surprised you, or that you had to learn? Did we pretty much able to pick it up from day one, or were there things about this job or this vineyard that took a while to learn?
Yeah, I think it's always evolving. I think getting into the field like this. So one of the unique things about the property here is it uses a trellis system called Scott Henry, which I mean I wouldn't say it's that unique, but it's not as common as the VSP system, for instance. So advice and drive, talking about that, there's not that many people to go to and be able to lean off, and I think, and then a lot of literature and a lot of the sort of basic information out there isn't driven towards the Scott Henry system. So there definitely was an uptick in trying to figure out how best to farm that, when to do it, how to do it. But as I'm sure, finding with, you talk to enough people in the industry, the information is great. People are very, very sharing, which, is indeed a huge plus when you go take on what we have, that people will share information and, what they've learned and what works for them and what doesn't. So yeah, it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't a huge swing for us, but definitely. And I'd love to say, I know what I'm doing, but we're learning all the time. You know what I mean? And the seasons are changing and doing all that. So I think we're still figuring a few things out, but at the same time, I think we've got the main gist of driving things along.
And Luke's been really awesome about, I mean, we took on all of the machinery and tractors, and some of them are creations that Dale came up with, and which work awesome, but it's more like we have to learn how to use it. And I think he had like 1 or 2 sessions with Dale where he handed him the keys and he said, this does this, and he just really had to roll with it, because we started on January 1, and a little trial and error. But I think that was something that I was really impressed about was, obviously he grew up with his dad being a surveyor. He was on a lot of machinery and tractor work, but it's definitely something you just have to learn quickly. And for me, I wasn't so much about the tractor work, although I do love, there's something about getting in the tractor and just like cruising through, which is awesome. But I like to talk to Victor a lot, because he's very simple about explaining things. And I ask him a lot of questions, and sometimes he looks at me and he's like, I don't know why, that's just what we do. But he's really great about explaining sort of what Dale did in the past and why, even if it's not the typically conventional way to do it. But I think you'd agree we are continuously learning new things and seeing how the weather changes every little step of the process, but continuous process.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, like with enough time, like Dave Nemanik at Aloro up the hill there. When we talk to Dave, he comes down here. It's even though what are we? Less than a mile apart, maybe, but it's different for him. Do you know what I mean? Different, and so while we're pretty well much on the same side, like this, each site's really unique in trying to feel what works best for that side and how to get the best out of it in that particular season.
Trial and error is kind of difficult when you're doing an annual crop. So tell me about that. Tell me about how you kind of make it work, where you have to produce a product each year, but also have to kind of learn along the way.
I think like a lot of people like trying to do that bit of risk management. So there's some things that you'll leverage and you think, look, we'll push it hard, or there's some things where we might just have to just investigate a few rows this year and and try and measure that out of that. So there's trial and error, but again, like you make promises to people at the beginning of the season, and you have to come through. You can't really say sorry, I didn't. My assumption didn't work this year. So and I think that's the good thing about trying to do a bit more expansion, just to give us a little bit more headroom to try some things. But I think some of the trial and error, like we see in the future, more comes around sort of the whole labour component. Like how do you grow and then try and keep your labour at a certain level. So I think we're focused a lot on the automation component and seeing where we can take that.
I'll come back to that because I have a question about that. But I'm curious, how would you describe sort of your farming philosophy at this point? What kind of farming style or technique?
Yeah, I'd love to sit there and say we're full organic. I mean, and one day I think we would hope to be. The farm didn't start out that way, and we're sort of trying to get ourselves towards that component. Whether we can reach that or not, it'll be interesting. It's hard. Like the Scott Henry system, it's a lot higher yielding system. So with the higher yields comes a few other pressures and dynamics that going a full organic may or may not be possible. But I think definitely we really try to embrace the sustainability. I think we try to we're working towards, we're still only being here a few years, to sort of be a little bit more holistic. When we hope to bring some sheep onto the property, doing things like that, where we can sort of bend into the cycle.
But one aspect that we brought in this year was, and it's minor, but it's still kind of in that philosophy of sustainability. Growing up in Queensland, Australia, water is not in abundance like it is here. So the first thing Luke wanted to do was we put in, was it a couple of 500 or 5,000 gallon tanks?
Yeah, we're trying to do rainwater harvesting. We're dry land, so we're not we don't irrigate. Young vines necessitate some level of irrigation, but that's all done by hand, and so trying to be pretty water conscious.
just for the record, what was planted that you took over here? What varietals were here, and what are you doing as you expand?
Okay, sure. The old blocks were put in 95 were Pomade, own rooted, and then also Pinot Gris. So they were the original blocks planted in 95. Then 2014, they expanded into really, it's called which when I say the mezcal method, Louisa Ponzi definitely is a large fan of that type of method. So which really a blend of Maidensville, Pomade, 777 and 115. And that's which is the block behind us as well, and then Chardonnay as well, and then so the new blocks we've added some additional Pomade. That's again, I think with the older blocks being own rooted was a little bit of an insurance policy, so we've gone to the grafted, and it's also it's a variety clone that does really well in this soil type. And then we've added 777 and 667. 115 and 667. And then next, in this fall we'll put in Gamay, and we'll add some additional Chardonnay, some 96.
As you're making those kind of expansion decisions, is it things you want to plant and grow, or is it things that people are asking you to plant and grow? How are you making those?
It's a bit of both. For us, we're not, obviously we're not a winery. We don't, and at this point in time, and I'd say we don't care to put a winery on here. We think there's some fantastic facilities out there that we'd rather, if we're going to make wine, and also people who really are good at doing it. So partnering with them. So I think that would be if we driving us. We may we will develop and make some wine off the site. But really our focus is growing and continuing to support Ponzi and J.K. Carrier and that who they have done for the last 20 years.
I know that as you grow, you're going to have, obviously, we have an expanded customer base in terms of people buying grapes from you, and as you're planting different things that are more appealing. Tell me about, you mentioned kind of the relationships you had coming into the industry and some of those kind of safety net kind of, tell me about building relationships with people who want to buy your grapes and how that works in terms of what you offer versus what they're asking for. How much of it is, are you looking for a certain person to make wines from these grapes? What part of it is, are they looking for you? And how do you kind of build those relationships and make them last into the future?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think a big philosophy that we have, and it is relationships. I think everyone talks about contracts and everything, but I mean, contracts are only worth the paper they're printed on. We're all I haven't heard, though I'm definitely sure there has been people going to court or legal battles over someone either providing too many grapes or not enough grapes or not at the right time. So it's definitely relationship driven. And so I think the philosophy we have is how do we, do what we need to do as a grower and try and be sustainable and profitable, but also the end client really saying, what do you want? How do you want it? And bend that into our overall program. With some of the newer, there's definitely, we've got, people like Ponzi and J.K. Carrier, definitely, I'd say, industry legends that, are up there. And then you've got people who are new on the scene trying to do something different. And I think that variety is good. I think it helps us sort of support sort of the old guard that's tried and tested and, and then people who are trying a few different things and actually, mixing up with a different clientele as well.
I think also just to, I think really Dale set a big foundation about Pinot Noir and who his clients are, and I think that's all really important for us to continue. I mean, that was really the basis of it. It still is, and it probably will be. And I think that's important to kind of continue that, just because that is the history of Gemini, and we also are really proud of that, I think. But I also think it's going to be a little bit, there's some room to have some adventures with, because we took it on and we're making it our own. And I think putting in Gamay, or, we've talked about a couple of, we have a little bit of room to add in. So we're debating about what we put in, because we do want to create some of our own.
Yeah, it'd be great to do something fun.
Yeah.
Like a Muscat or a Riesling or something. Yeah, who knows what we can do. But that would be nice to be able to have some sort of headway and to be able to play with something, you know what I mean? Instead of just so focused on, this is what we need to do year in, year out. But the Gamay will be a good, interesting experiment. I mean, it's, there's a few that it's been in the valley for quite some time, but it's a fun varietal. So definitely like Ian and then Love and Squalor, both of those, we support as well. And they're both, some of the younger folks that are trying to sort of really push forward with the Gamay market, which will be interesting to see where it gets to.
Obviously in high demand right now.
It's definitely a buzz. I think, who knows, by the time we get it into growing, no one might want it. But,
by the time we actually get fruit out of it 4 years from now.
But it seems it's pretty versatile. It seems what people are doing with it. So we'll see.
As you talk about those relationships for your wine sales, I'm curious, what is it you look for in a winemaker? What kind of winemaker are you looking for to buy grapes and to have a relationship with?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there's a lot of ways to answer that, right?
Probably early on. Just anybody who wants to buy grapes from us at the point.
But no, I think people that one thing that we've had is people who you can work with, the seasons and everything, and the weather, especially when you get to harvest time, you want to be saying, hey, let's pick a date and do that. You got to pick the weather, get the crew, so people who understand that and willing to work with you. You do the best you can with what you've got, and I'm sure they're doing the same thing. You turn up there with 10 ton of grapes and their forklift's broken or what, what I mean. It's just things don't come out the way you need. So I think trying to work as a team to sort of get to the end so it can get in the bottle eventually. So I think that definitely working relationship, apart for us, especially because we're new, people who would be happy to help provide some guidance instead of just say, look, no, just help try this, do this. So that was big. So, Louisa and Jim have been extremely great, and sort of
and Dave.
And Dave.
Too.
Well, Dave is our winemaker for sure. Just trying to help steer, how do we get your product to be what you want it to be?
Mm-hmm.
But also, Jim really understands, he's been buying the grapes for so long that he really understands the capacity of what the wine can be. And so he has he knows the site better than we do, and he knows what the grapes can do. So, he always says our grapes turn out to be a really bold kind of red is what he says type of wine. And I think it's really nice that we have the established relationships because they do know what our grapes can do. And, I think there's kind of an expectation of the quality and the farming style, so that, we do produce the type of grapes that we do. And, so far so good. We've hopefully continued that. But it's nice when other people, when the name kind of explains itself and the quality of the fruit as well. And it's great that other people understand that, what our site can do, really.
It's interesting to me, as you mentioned that, because you talk about having Victor staying on, and then having people like Jim and Louise who've been buying your grapes for a long time, so there are people who know your site really well.
Yeah.
I'm curious. Sorry.
Olive, get out of here, Missy.
Hi, sweetie. I'm curious, for you, the process of learning your site. How comfortable do you feel with your site right now, and at what point, what more do you need to learn? What are you looking forward to understanding better?
If you asked me that in January, I'd say I felt really comfortable. But considering the fruit set, I'd be like, I don't really know what's going on.
Yeah.
It's been this year just it's like a curveball that we just had all that rain, and I think we all were just crossing our fingers until we'll see what came out of it. I think we all knew it was going to be different. Mm-hmm. But I mean, this year's just so crazy. Our clusters went from, they shrunk to half the size. And that's not just that's the good clusters too, right? We went from a great fruit set and phenomenally big clusters last year to half the size. Why did it do that? I mean, who knows? So just So I mean, you just can't preempt that. But at the same time, I think with different pressures that are upon us, that we can, I think we've got a good handle on how to sort of keep the site going, and letting it do what it needs to do, and then we just have to sort of ride out that sort of variability that comes just with an organic thing producing through the season. So,
But also we do a lot of work ourselves in the vines. I think with Victor, and we drag our family and friends out when we really are crunch time to leaf pull or whatever it is. So, for me anyway, that's how I've learned it, and I know certain blocks better because I'm, usually in leaf pulling in this one, or doing whatever we need to do in which block. So that's how I've really learned it. Is we don't have a big crew. It's us and our 3-year-old boys on their little tractors and Victor. And so really, like, it's how we've learned it is we just have had to get in there and do it from day one. And luckily we both love to do that type of work, the farming and kind of hands-on. So, and that's actually been really fun for me because, before we did all of this, I enjoyed wine, but actually farming it shows you what every little step that goes into producing a bottle. So now my appreciation for it is skyrocketed because I know what goes into it. I know like how you cross your fingers that it doesn't rain during bloom, or how we race at harvest to get everything in, weather dependent, or if we have the crew to do it. So that to me has really been the fun part of it, is really just doing it ourselves and jumping in from day one.
So far we try to keep that way. With like part of the philosophy, I guess we should have touched on, was being a lot of the site being unrooted. So we do not try and bring in crews. We which sometimes would be great just to have a crew drop in here and just go through it, because time when you either know rain's coming or whatever. But we try to avoid that. So it makes life a little tougher and longer, but at the same time, I think gives that bit of insurance that we're not sort of dragging things on site. And so far, and whether we can keep maintaining that with the extra blocks coming on is like just we'll keep our own crews and not be bringing in sort of external crews.
Has the unrooted presented any kind of challenge beyond that at this point?
So
has having unrooted vines presented any further challenge to you at this point?
Not so far. I mean, from what I understand, like talking to other folks who have unrooted old vines, like the flocks are a part of site. They're actually phenomenal. Like they're very scented. They seem to sort of deal with the environmental curveballs a lot better than the grafted. And again, like like especially the old vines, like but there's a risk there, and just trying to manage that the best we can.
I'm curious about the challenge of moving toward organic from a different kind of farming. What's the timeline on something like that? What are the kind of steps you take along the way?
Yeah, I think one is we're sort of, again, I think the first part was tackling the use of glyphosate. Which again, there's a big industry push anyway. So we tackled that this year, and that definitely, again, you talk about learning. There's definitely things you learn along the way without jumping that part. Can we get away from complete synthetic herbicides and fungicides? That'll be the drive, and I think that's, again, for us, being like you said, like with the Scott Henry system, more fruit, bigger canopy. We'll see how we'll go. I think it may be the reality is if we're going to go full organic, we might have to go back to VSP. And I mean, if that's a choice, we'll have to choose.
You talked really about sort of automation as something you're looking at. Tell me about that and how you kind of experiment and figure out how that's going to work for your future.
Yeah, I mean, I think equipment's developed. Like, to me, I don't know whether we'll get to the harvest stage. I think that will be one of the last parts if we went to full automatic harvesting, especially with the clients we have and how they utilize the product. So we respect that. Though it's something that we do think about as we put in new trellis systems to make sure that if we go, we can go to that, because I don't want to be retrofitting down the road. So we do spend the extra energy and capital to put the type of trellis in that can deal with heavier automation. That's harder on it. The other part, like I think it's just again the huge attention. I think next year my focus, especially with the seasons being the way they are, is looking at leaf pulling, automated leaf pulling. I think trying to be able to do that in waves and quicker. Like again, like that's the part is like, do you bring on a crew that we can leaf pull the side in a week, or do you invest in leaf in some automated leaf pulling that alleviates the crew, but can hopefully then cover the time frame.
Have you seen similar efforts from other parts of the industry? Are you seeing other people doing similar planning?
Absolutely, yeah. The people, and again, that's where the beauty of the industry is people willing to share that sort of knowledge and everything like that. So, groups like Stoller, other sort of management groups that we're connected to that have definitely tried and tested, and are using that equipment. So I think that gives you a bit more surety that you're not just the guinea pig.
As you've come to know the site, how would you describe its terroir? What is the terroir of Gemini Vineyards?
That is a really good question. How we can sort of get there. I mean, so first of all, which people think it's a negative, but we find out like these vines grow like crazy. Like the vigor on these vines, like this side is so vigorous. Like we just had Jim Prosser here, obviously different, block, but we planted these last fall. He's got vines that don't look that good that are 3-year-old. You know what I mean? And so the vigor on this side is fine, and that helps us drive to the Scott Henry and these higher yields. And it's interesting in the industry, people think, the long common saying is like, they need to be stressed, they need to be low yielding to get good quality. Luckily for us, like the work that was done with Dick Ponzi and Louisa and Dale back in the day to see like does 4 tons an acre still produce good quality wine? So Jim produces J.K. Carey produces a single label Gemini Vineyard, 94 points, 4.5 tons an acre. You know what I mean? So
Wow.
To me, so the philosophy that like 2 tons an acre produces good wine, I think it's site specific. I don't prescribe to that, and I think the beauty for me is I'm novice enough that I can say I don't prescribe to that. You know what I mean? And really, like, it's up for me to prove everyone else that they're wrong. So I think that to me that's a big part of like when you say, well, okay, we do these vines grow phenomenally well. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of the industry now, their tendrils are, they're starting to die and drop off. Like, we're still steaming along, and haven't had a drop of rain really for nearly, about 6-7 weeks now. And it's just so the fruit's very bold, very rich, very fruit forward, and again, like the skins, like a thick, it's a very thick skin that it produces. So like the color when you can get it out is ultimately extremely red, a real ruby.
Obviously, you mentioned one of the reasons for doing this was the family farm now, having your children. So tell me about their role here, and then sort of the family, how the family-run business is working that you planned.
Well, we have 3-year-old twin boys, and so we have to do a lot of our farm work after hours, during nap time, and I like to think it's similar to what Dale and Marcella started when they had 5 kids. We definitely will expect or hope that our boys are out there working with us. His kids grew up doing it, and that's sort of our goal too, is that they have an appreciation for where they live, and it was a lot of work to get here. So I think that right now they just drive around on their little tractors and let mom and dad do some work, but we are also like, Luke's out on the tractor at 10 o'clock at night, and we get up early to do what we need to do. So, but luckily we have family around and some good friends, and they know that we're just starting out. They know we don't get crews in. So like last summer we had my and this is all on by choice, but I had a big group of my aunts and my grandma, who was like 87, come out, and she's a great gardener, so she's out there leaf pulling like crazy, and they love it. And we have work party days. So we're lucky that people are around to help, and they're excited about it. We did a little try to experiment about, when we harvested our Chardonnay last year, because it's a smaller block. Could we do it ourselves? It was our first one. We had my cousin come up and help us. He's a surveyor, so he helps us plot out our new blocks and measure everything out so we know how and where to plant. And so it's really, sometimes it's chaotic and we get whoever we can to help us, and other times we get it under control. And luckily this year we have a better idea of the demand, I guess. Obviously I think that'll change every year, but we know what to expect a little bit better. So we're learning, but it's definitely still as busy. It's just not as chaotic, I think. And I think we're getting a better grasp of it, but luckily we have a good, and like Luke said earlier, like the people in this industry are incredible. I mean, we came in here and we're nobodies, and we've had so many people reach out to us and say, this is what we've done, try this. Yes, you can try our machine. I mean, it's incredible. Like we really thought there'd be a big sense of like competition and between all the different vineyards and wineries, but what we've learned very quickly is that's not the case, and that it's more of a, as if Oregon does well, everybody does well. And it's really this group effort to make it world renowned like it's getting. And so luckily we've had so much guidance and help from really cool people to, newbies who just really wanted to live on land and loved the site.
So in terms of does the family farm aspect, does that help? Is that a part of the sale? Are people excited and attracted to you because you have this new to the farm, have the kids doing the thing on the vineyard? Is that something that appeals to people, that helps people find you or build relationships?
Yeah, I think that I think we're trying to do it. Like, it's not, I think there's definitely a lot of I think there's definitely folks who want to live on a vineyard, but like happy to pay, folks to look after the vineyard. Where for us, it's like we really want to make it our own and try and develop it into something that we can do. And you don't get that from standing back. I think you need to sort of get up to your elbows and figure out and get the feeling of, are the vines doing what they need to do? What's the weather telling you? All that sort of stuff.
I think they think it's pretty funny because we just got chickens this last spring. So we have chickens. We're planning on doing sheep and different things. And sometimes people look at us like, okay, these people they've lost their minds. But to us, like seeing our boys race around and, chase the chickens. And I don't know, it's to me a little bit more nostalgic because I remember doing that as a little kid on my grandparents' farm. And, Luke grew up on property. So that's a big element of the Hayr family and kind of what we hope for our boys. So yes, it's a vineyard, but I think we also have some aspirations to have a little bit of a homestead or whatever it may be, that we try out different things because we've got some good space here.
You mentioned earlier kind of making some wine yourselves or partnering with people to make wine. So tell me about that kind of project and where that has it started and where is it going?
We were able to get a ton that we were able to take last year to develop into wine. I think the big driver is to have a product that we can say comes from our side. Like I said, even though Jim at JK Carrier produces a label designate for here, it was just something that we can put our own name to it. And again, not like it wasn't for us to get into the wine selling business so much, but more to try and say, like, to give the site a little bit more identity. And I think also just to sort of like, it gives you part of I think you really understand the whole process, right? You're in there, like a lot of your clients, understanding the whole, from start to finish. So we're lucky. And then, I think the other part was, it was a little bit more seamless for us because, again, we became connected with David Page, phenomenal winemaker. And, so it's not like we had to go hunting for someone to do it. And Dave was gracious enough that, he said he would help, do some work with us. And so it felt, very just normal to be able to sort of, go in that direction.
And we also got a lot of push from people like, you guys are close into town, you guys have really good grapes, you could easily sell it, why not? And I think that was kind of like, well, I don't know, why not? I mean, I guess, we need to give it a go. And so we're kind of going through all the licensing and that process now, but I think the light is at the end of the tunnel now.
We haven't embraced the tasting room scenario yet, as in, I think we'd be happy to sell some wine, but to get into the full commercial component of it, I think, whether we ever get there or not.
It's interesting you talk about the first site, the site you were almost closing on. It's having that all of those.
Yeah.
components. Was that part of the plan?
No, it was. We sort of stumbled across it. It was, I think, that's when we were looking. We were at there was a large sort of walnut farm, and then we sort of. I think the big step was I was talking to one of the biggest nut growers in the region and just getting some ideas about what to do, and he knew the site we were looking at. And he's like, if I was you, I'd pull the walnuts out and put in grapes. And I was like, that's what I was like, well, if I'm going to do that, I might as well go buy a vineyard now, like instead of build it from scratch. So that's that segue. And then that site was there, and it was in a spot we've always been a big fan of El Cove and that region, and that was there, and it was fully established and needed some work. But the winery was there, but it wasn't. It was sort of.
A bonus, really. I would say it's a bonus.
Because when you get the winery, you really are a commercial site. You know what I mean? Where what we were looking for was really a home site. So it wasn't the greatest choice, and that's why I think coming here, like the less complication, like it really is a home site with a vineyard, not a vineyard that has a home on it.
So I'm curious, we're talking to you in August 2020, so we're dealing with COVID, and that's why you're interviewing in a mask. Dealing with COVID and sort of kind of finding our way through it. I'm curious how it's affected your wine lives, I guess, and lives in general, and maybe how it's affected your view of the future for the industry or for yourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think every industry is asking that question, right? What is the future? I think initially, like I was worried to say what would happen, and then I think, and then how would we manage that into there? Like you can't just tell a grapevine to say, can you produce half of what you did last year? But like whether we're lucky or not, like the season seemed to have told itself to do that. Do you know what I mean? So yields will be lower across in general. Yeah. So some of that is going to naturally drive itself that way. So I feel like this year, like it is what it is. Everyone's, my rationale would be everyone's going through the same pain. It's not just us, the whole thing. So I think it's very grounding to think like, whatever we're going through, so is everybody else from, from here down through California everywhere. So, again, I think we're lucky who we're partnered with. People, like you think, who do you work through? I think this is a really good test to figure out, have you got the right partners and how are they willing to work with you through that? So that's been really reassuring and something we felt really lucky as well. The future, you're right, I'm trying to not get too wrapped up in like what is the future. Because I don't, you know what I mean? Who knows?
But we're lucky where we're small enough that we're pretty self-contained. So our main priority is to make sure that Victor is safe and he's got what he needs. And I think one concern that we have is how we're going to work harvest this year. And we have been thinking about it, and we're hoping that there's some industry sort of recommendations that are going to come out about how we tackle that. But our site, because we're self-contained, we don't have, we'll have some challenge with harvest, but we don't have a big winery. We don't have, we're not going through crush with different people. So I think we'll have to think about how we just stay safe during, delivery, and we do what our partners need us to do to stay safe. I mean, it's a weird year to be, like, it's our second year. Luckily, it's our second year and not our first year, because I think that would have just been really chaotic. But not that it's the new normal, but it's really made us think, some things are, I don't know, like making sure that we think ahead of getting our supplies that we need and whatever, so that we're minimizing our exposure. Because like Luke told me the other day, we were talking about it, and he's like, the vines don't stop. It's not like we can just say, we'll cut it off and we'll catch up next year. I mean, we have to see the whole process out. So we're lucky that we're outside and we're pretty small, that we can just kind of do our thing. But, it'll be really good to get the industry perspective on how we tackle this and how we do it together, which is where the whole part about, it's not a competition. Everybody's, not little girl, sorry.
No, it's okay.
It's not, everybody's really saying, how are we going to do this together and figure it out? And we'll figure it out. Life goes on, we're going to have to figure it out. But I'm glad this isn't our first year doing this, because it has been, it's stressful just in general. Like, we have our family to think about, and Victor's family and Victor himself. So just really have to see how we go.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot to play out, right?
Yeah.
So, we'll see.
It's really interesting coming from a public health background.
I can imagine.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I have, some of my good friends are epidemiologists working in CDC stuff, doing the tracking. And so it's strange to be out of that arena at the moment, and being in, agriculture. So, but it is a little bit strange to have my perspective and think, all these different things that are happening, and really be pulled out of that. That's been kind of odd for me.
So, pandemic aside, what do you see as you look ahead for Oregon wine? What's the industry going to look like over the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, I think for our little bubble, I think that's hopefully I think the whole bouncing of the restaurant industry, I think that's that's going to tell a lot, right? That's from my perspective, because it's such an avenue, especially for the higher end wines and things like that. Most folks that we talk to is, people are doing okay, especially those that have avenues into sort of good retail. But at the same time, like, those really high, the high-end Pinots that people were trying to strive, that, the main avenues was, cellar door and restaurants. So, depending on what happens with that restaurant component, I think I think the whole could change the whole product mix of what people are driving to do. My understanding from talking to folks this year is, like that sort of medium and lower tier wines, like, will be a big push compared to trying to create as many high tier wines. Because they just can move them, and so so that could actually quite change the whole sort of dynamic of what people are trying to do. With us, because we're not on that retail side, we're not on the we're not selling wine to individuals. Like, we're sort of more on what we're hearing and seeing from people who we're selling our grapes to. But we're lucky, like, trying to manage a tasting room and all that in this environment. I feel for folks in that.
But I've also seen a lot of creativity. I know you said outside of the pandemic, but I think that I think that creativity is going to carry through. I mean, it's amazing, different things that we see on Instagram of wineries and vineyards, how they're still having people come out, but they have little cabanas set up, and then they have a tractor like drive them out to the cabanas. I mean, stuff like that's, if you think about it, it's pretty ingenious, and it's also a way for people to see your site better, as opposed to just seeing the tasting room and maybe wandering here and there. Or like the wine, like the different wine shops I've seen, they set up little seating areas and they're several feet apart. I've been really impressed by the creativity of people. I'm not a creative brain, so when I see stuff like that, I'm always amazed, because I just think, well, that's perfect. It's pretty ingenious to think about. It's a way also to showcase your property and the different things that you can do. Still have people come out on site, but be safe about it. So I think one thing that I think will be after this is the creativity will continue.
Yeah, I mean, the whole embrace. I mean, it's happened all over, hasn't it? Like, people utilizing social media more, people utilizing the internet more, trying to, find a way to ship wine to people, get wine to people. So we'll see what.
But people are always going to need wine, right? So
Well, they say
that's the
consumption. That's what they say. Alcohol consumption's gone way up through this pandemic.
can't say I blame that.
Yeah.
People are home with their families.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
That's why
yeah.
So I mean, and whether it's going, that's where I feel like it'll be different. And I think it'll just be depending on like what they look at selling through the products. So.
So as you mentioned, this is just your second year doing this. I'm curious, as you look ahead for yourselves, what do you see for your own future and for the future of Gemini? Are there goals you want to achieve? Is there a size you want to be? Is there anything you want to add, or is it just kind of continued growth?
I think, look, as our other blocks come online, and the few blocks that we put in this fall, I think just to start rounding ourselves out, our production. We'll go from about 40 tons, so we'll go up to around sort of 60 plus. So that extra third will help us support more some of the folks that we have that are growing and hopefully continue to grow. But then hopefully endeavour to sort of bring on another one or two partners. And then also I think it'll help us just, again, that sort of, we want to have our own offering. Again, it's not looking to create a winery. I think it's more about just trying to have more of that identity if people say, what, Gemini wine. But also, I think always keeping to say, while we may have our own wine, we stand behind the partners that, that sort of forge their way and do make a great product themselves. So I think it's just sort of trying to just round all that out.
It's amazing how many people like drive past and stop or ask like, when are you guys open today? And it's like, well, we're not. And Dale said that would happen, and we have people drive through and take photos, which is always a little bit odd, but it will be nice to just have our own bottle with our name on it. It's to us, it was a small goal, just something to be proud of, and I guess have a, not that we're making the wine, but a lot of love goes into that. So I think it's nice to be able to show like this is us.
Yeah.
I'm curious for you. You mentioned having a renewed appreciation for wine, having been a part of the process now. I'm curious if you are. Do you taste the decisions? Are you at the point now where you see like, okay, this person's growing grapes this way? Do you appreciate that more? Do you taste? I don't know how to describe this. Do you taste like organic decisions or?
I don't know that I'm that. I'm definitely still learning. I think I don't know that I could taste those different things. I definitely think I could know what different varietals, and by no means could I say, oh, this is definitely organic or, we're live certified, nothing like that. But I have a better understanding of, it's not just growing grapes, pressing them and putting it into a bottle. The time it takes these people to do these things and the gear that they have to have is incredible. And it's really not just growing the grapes, it's really not just making it, it's the entire process, and it really has to be streamlined to make it happen. So the amount, I think for me, it's more about the amount of effort that goes into it is incredible. When I think, when we pop open a bottle, it's like, okay, is this Scott Henry? What's the type of, it's stuff like that we think about now. Or we drive past vineyards and we're like, oh wow, everything's really nicely hedged, and what are they, So it's more of just a bigger awareness of grape growing and viticulture in general. The drinking aspect of it, I've got a lot to learn, even though I have a lot of experience. But it is a better appreciation for the whole process.
Yeah, I think I don't taste like organic difference or biodynamic. But when I see the word organic, I appreciate that they must probably did 10 times more sprays than I did. So I definitely understand,
Their tractor works.
Yeah, it's definitely, that the word organic comes with a lot more work and a lot more stress. So, but yeah, well, the whole, I think the journey, again, I think that's one of the beauties of whether it's like the journey, you know what I mean? Like, and that's, whether for our boys, like as they come with it with us, whether they choose to pick that up themselves or not, who knows? But
even our family, like Luke's brothers, starting a vineyard in Tasmania because he's come here and he came for a vacation here and we put him to work pulling the canes down during pruning. So, stuff like that where I think a lot of just our friends and family see now how much work goes into it because they've watched us or they've helped. That just in general. I mean, and that's also a bonus of being part of this is to help people understand what it takes to get into it or what goes into that bottle. And we were one of those people that we appreciated it and loved it, but we had no really in-depth understanding. And that's been kind of fun to have people be part of that.
There is an interesting question. You talked about like the appreciation for organic, especially. I'm curious, is that something that gets relayed to customers well? Do customers understand? How do you educate customers on people who drink the wine on how much more work it is to be organic?
I think that's interesting because like some people like want organic no matter what, like whether it tastes good or not because of just the perception of like, well, if I drink organic, it's safe, whether it's safer, more wholesome, that component. And then do people? The point comes down to is like, is it worth more? Do you know what I mean? Would they pay more for it? It's interesting. Does it taste different? Do you know what I mean?
I think that's a big. I think you'd get a big debate with people on that because people who are not organic can say our wine tastes just as great, And so I'd be curious because we're not wine, we're not winemakers, so I'd love to get to see head to head and see what they would say about that.
But I mean, like I think, like when I think organic, I think of the spray program, right? Because it's a big part of the organic notion. But I mean, it's way bigger than that. I mean, how many farmers are going head to head with all their gophers, right? And the difference between going around gas and gophers, or trying to put in more nesting boxes for owls and eagles and things like that. I think it's more it's more the drive towards sustainability and not trying to have to bend in with nature instead of trying to just push it off.
And also, if we want to do this for the next 20 years, we really have to take care of the land we're on and be really cognizant of although we're out in the country, we're still part of a bigger community. We're on well water. So we really have to think about and things that I never really thought of before, like how a neighbor a mile away or half mile away spraying their blackberries can drift over and affect our grapes. You really think about things a lot more holistically now, because whatever is in the environment will affect our crop or our and we think about that with our kids. We want to be really cognizant of, and that's why we're getting away from certain things that we have used in the past, but we're part of a bigger, I guess, the scheme of things. We're not just our own Gemini Vineyards. We're part of a bigger community, and we really, and that's that's another beauty of Oregon. I think we have a really good green prospect, and people have a good understanding as to why we need to be considerate of different things. But that's really something that Luke and I, small things that we think about all the time, goes into our decision making.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Like you think about whether what we're in at the moment with COVID, I think people will naturally lean towards organic style, farming. But at the same thing, it's just got to be balanced out on the reality of what you can and can't do. But I mean, people are doing organic and it works. So.
That's all the questions that I have for you too. Is there anything I didn't ask that I should have? Anything we didn't cover here?
No, you covered a lot. Yeah. Most of us ask more things than we tend to try and think about all in one go.
Sorry.
Does put some thoughts in your brain, like, oh yeah.
Good. Well, good. Hopefully not too painful. That's all.
No, not at all.
I mean,
Happy to be part of it.
Everyone's stories is unique.
It actually is really fun to see your guys, who all you've interviewed and different perspectives. It's been really cool to see.
Good. Excellent. Well, thank you. That's awesome. And thank you both for your time, for your stories, for your hospitality on this perfect day.
Yeah, not too hot.
Not too hot. I mean, you picked a great day.
We'll go ahead and let you off the hook. Thank you
all right,
so much.
thanks a lot.
Thank you.